Hello and welcome to the channel. I am William Gwynne and today I will be talking about some of my favourite books of all time. Today I'll be talking about my 70th favourite read to my 61st. So talking about 10 of those books. There'll be a series of other videos talking about, well, the other groups of 10 all the way up to number 1. But today I'm talking about my 70th favourite to my 61st favourite. I've got a huge array of books here across a wide range of genres because I'm quite a random reader like that. I delve into a lot of different sub-genres as well as completely different types of books. So we'll see fantasy, historical fiction, literary fiction, mythological retellings, the whole lot. I've not included anything that isn't a book in this, so short stories, novellas or poems or plays. I have left that, so I may do some other videos about my favourites of those. But today we're talking about books and let's get right into it. So first up, I have a book called Skellig, and so this is labelled as young adult fantasy fiction, but it's a bit like Neil Gaiman in the sense that children can read it, but it is also very enjoyable, in my opinion anyway, to adults. And I read this from the recommendation of my father, Papa Gwynne himself, and I loved it, as did he. This is about a boy who is experiencing a time of significant change. It's set in the modern world, well, modern when it was written. I believe it was written 1998, around that time. And yes, as I said, it's a period of significant change. This boy, this teenager, maybe young teenager, is moving to a new house. His mother has just given birth, but his newborn sister is very ill. So it is a time of stress and they don't know which way it's going to go. And whilst all of this is going on, he goes into the garage, his new garage, and he finds a very odd man in there. And that is all I will say about the main premise. It is a beautiful story. It sounds a bit odd like that, but honestly, just give it a go. It's a very short read, very easy to read, and it is a beautiful story. And the how this relationship grows with the person in the garage and what you find out about them is very interesting. Who are they? Where they come from? Why are they there? It has some similarities to A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, in my opinion, in that there is an external figure outside the normal family which really helps provide a link to help and combat what is going on in this boy's own life. I won't say whether it's real or not, like A Monster Calls, but this is a really beautiful story, as I said, in that sense, and I think that is one that, for such a short story, which is very, very efficient, quite stripped back, and it doesn't linger too much on certain events. It's not flowery, it just gets to the point of what is going on. I think it's a beautiful story, and it does a lot with those pages. Next up, as my 69th favourite read of all time at the moment, because it always changes, but I have Heroes by Stephen Fry. This is the second instalment in his Greek retellings. So the first one is Mythos, and it's about really the beginning of the creation of the world in Greek mythology, a lot about the gods and the early years, basically. And Heroes it's what it says, basically. It's about heroes of Greek mythology, loads that we have heard about, obviously, but also I've really enjoyed that this is about some more obscure figures that are heroes, but we don't hear about as much as, say, Hercules today. But this was really entertaining. Obviously, it's written by Stephen Fry, so it's going to contain his wit and charm and just superb intelligence. He's got such a sharp mind, and that, along with his wit, really oozes through the pages, making this simultaneously really entertaining and laugh out loud hilarious, but also at the same time very educational. I came out of this thinking, wow, I've actually really learned a lot, but I didn't realise it as I was going through it. But yeah, this was so much fun. It doesn't feel overwhelming. Mythos, I thought, was prone to being a little bit repetitive because of the nature of the stories. It is a collection of short stories told throughout the book. There isn't a link to the beginning and end other than it's just about Greek mythology. Whereas Heroes, you spend a bit longer with the characters and the stories, they vary a bit more. They're not as repetitive in the didactic messages that were trying to be told in the Greek mythological tales in Mythos. But yes, Heroes was really entertaining. Obviously, it's Greek history, Greek mythology, I mean, not history. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of tragedy. They did love their tragic tales. And yes, there is a fair share of that in Heroes. And I read the next one, which is called Troy, which is the third instalment, and I believe Stephen Fry has one more called Odysseus, which I'm not sure if it's released yet, but I'm definitely going to get to that, and I'd highly recommend the whole series. But you can jump just straight to this, because you don't need to have read Mythos to understand everything, and this is my favourite so far. So as my 68th favourite book of all time, I have The Counselor by E.J. Beaton. So this is a Machiavellian fantasy brimming with political intrigue, unique characters and brilliant prose that is almost unrivaled in most of what I have read. So the premise is that the Queen has died and has left the realm of Illyria, I'm not sure how you say it, fractured and very fragile, and there's a number of different kingdoms, and maybe one of the rulers of that will become the next ruler of them all. But our main perspective, Lysande, is given the responsibility of choosing the next ruler, and this is thrust upon her suddenly. She did not expect it. She is a scholar and as it says, a counsellor, but she is given that role, and this is about trying to find out simultaneously who killed the Queen, but who to choose as the next ruler, because this is very political, as I said, and she's choosing from the nobility, all who seem very self-serving and maybe not best fitting being a ruler. So she's got a huge responsibility on her shoulders, and E.J. Beaton balances the political intrigue with the plot progression as well as character development absolutely wonderfully. It is very easy to get lost in political intrigue, but E.J. Beaton does a brilliant job of keeping you engaged, trickling in bits of information that really hook you, and then when it all comes together in the end, it is absolutely brilliant. There is very little action in this, it's all about the characters, but then when it does come to a climactic ending, it is a huge action sequence which was sweeping and just quite breathtaking. And as I've said, with all this brilliant plot, well-building characters, it is all brought together by the rich but very stripped-back prose, which does a brilliant job of exposing exactly what E.J. Beaton wants to, but not too much, not too little. And it feels very natural, and it's very easy to read. And as I said, this is Machiavellian fantasy. E.J. Beaton, I believe, did a PhD in studying Machiavellian politics in Shakespeare. So there you go, that is very prevalent in here, and yeah, she does a brilliant job of it. And The Counselor, hence why it's on this list, is one of my favourite reads of all time. Next up, I have Legend by David Gemmell, the standalone which kick-started the hugely successful career of David Gemmell, the fantasy author. He was an integral author, I believe, regarding the evolution of fantasy, as he took the elements of traditional fantasy, but then added highly flawed characters and very gritty worlds. He wasn't the first to do this, but I think he is very important in popularising it and moving fantasy forward in that sense, and it has provided us with much of the fantasy that we've got now, where it's carried on that kind of journey, becoming ever more gritty and more realistic. And yeah, realistic in the sense that there are some terrible people in these books that feel real. But yes, this is an epic book that is essentially about a huge siege, and it is about defending an undermanned castle from a huge empire threat which is coming to take over. So Dros Delnok is the castle, and it is set in a pass which, if it is taken, then the force attacking it will be able to sweep across the empire, which is on the other side of that pass. So it's set in a place a bit like, imagine Thermopylae, but there's a castle there. But yes, so this is very entertaining. Dros is a retired veteran who is seen as a living legend by soldiers and the Draenei Empire. He is somehow brought back into the defence of this castle, and it feels a bit like Achilles in the Iliad, where he's given a choice basically to live and stay in peace, or most probably, you don't know, but most probably die, because this seems like a doomed defence. But unlike Achilles, he doesn't go for glory, he does this for duty and the sense of this is what he must do. And Dros is a very interesting figure in that way. He is quite quiet and calm, but fierce in battle and conflict, and the way that he takes leadership and shows how he inspires others is brilliant in this book. David Gemmell brings all of this together in what is quite sparse, stripped back prose, a bit like I said with E.J. Beaton, but serving a very different purpose. This is about just showing the events that are unfolding, and because of that prose choice, it feels just very honest and authentic, even though it feels weird saying that when it's set in a fantasy world, but it feels like it could be happening. It feels immersive and engaging. This is a story of tragedy and heroism, hope and despair. It has so much heart from start to finish, and Dros is a brilliant, iconic character, and David Gemmell manages to play with your emotions so effortlessly. And yeah, he is a brilliant author, and so Legend may not be the only book you see on this list of my favourites. You may not see another one by him in this video, but there definitely will be some in the videos to come. Next up, I have Arthur, High King of Britain by Michael Morpurgo. This is a children's book, so maybe if I read it for the first time now, it would not be on this list. But it has so much nostalgia that when I reread it, I believe last year or maybe the year before, I absolutely loved it again. And as I said, that may be due to nostalgia. This is my favourites of all time. I'm not saying the greatest books of all time. But yes, so this is about the Arthurian legend, and it's a retelling. There is a main story, but then at points it breaks away to tell some short stories about surrounding characters such as some Knights of the Round Table, Gawain, Percival and Tristan. Oh my goodness, I cried. I think this may have been the first book after Papa Gwynne's Ruin, which, oh, you may not be able to see it. Papa Gwynne's Ruin, it may be the first book that I actually really cried at, because the story of Tristan and Isolde just really broke me. It's just so sad. But yes, I've loved Arthurian Legend almost my entire life. I absolutely adore it. At college, I decided to do an extended project where I talked about the evolution of Arthurian Legend. So that says how obsessed I am that I've decided to write an essay on it. But yes, so I absolutely love Arthurian Legend. I think Michael Morpurgo does a great job of showing this in a manner which is accessible to children and really enjoyable, but it still has a lot of heart. And when I reread it, I picked up on a lot more themes perhaps than I did the first time. And it's such a tragic story. That relationship between tragedy and heroism is so prevalent in this book. And yeah, if anyone's got children they want to introduce a book to, I'd highly recommend this. Or if you're just interested, and it's such a small book, you could blitz through it in just a few hours. Next up, number 65, I have Night Shadow by Sebastian de Castell. This is the second instalment in the Greatcoats Quartet. And this is fantasy, and the brilliance of this rests with Sebastian de Castell's wit. A bit like Stephen Fry in that sense. He is absolutely hilarious. His story is brilliant, but it's got a lot of heart as well. And the wit oozes through the pages, mainly through our main character Falcio and his two best friends, who are Kest and Brasti. This trio, this bromance, I'd say the best bromance in any book that I've ever read, drives the story. It acts as the heart. There are terrible things going on, and I enjoyed the plot, but the characters by far were the shining light in this book. I laughed out loud so many times, but the way that you see under this humour, where they make jabs at each other and very sarcastic with each other and take the mick out of the others, even when they're in situations where it's most likely they're about to die, that seems like their priority to annoy the others. You see that underneath that they really do love each other and they will do anything to keep each other alive. And this is a story about a king has sacrificed himself and died because of the nobility arising against him, and he's given to who were his guards the job of trying to bring back some semblance of honour and respect and peace throughout the land. And so that's a huge responsibility, and with everything that's going against them, these characters would give up if it were not for their friends. They keep each other going, and it is absolutely brilliant. It's a bit like The Wolf Den in that sense, a very different book, but it's those around them, and it's about friendship and camaraderie that really keeps people going and means so much. You see when these characters are separated at points, the effect it has on them, and it is a beautiful story in that sense, but very brutal as well. And Sebastian de Castell has a lot of absolutely hilarious moments. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times in the flesh, and he is as funny in real life as he is through his books. And in the 64th spot, I have Circe or Circe by Madeline Miller. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. This is a Greek retelling by Madeline Miller, the hugely successful author of the Song of Achilles. But then she went on to write Circe a few years later, and it has been even more popular, even though I cannot... It's crazy how that's possible after how impactful Song of Achilles has been. But yes, I believe that she is a huge part of already kickstarting the rush of Greek retellings that we have seen in recent years. And this is amongst the best, in my opinion. So she is a more obscure character in Greek mythology, but she is there, which I really enjoyed that Madeline Miller took that choice. Take someone who she's got a lot more freedom with, someone who we really get to know and don't really know much about previously, but she plays small roles in many of the myths and retellings that we know, and she does, like, such as Odysseus may make an appearance. But yes, Madeline Miller does a brilliant job of balancing all of that, but this is a character-driven story, and it is about identity and belonging and finding something to believe in. And basically, Circe is a immortal figure who does not agree with a lot of what is going on, but it's not really easy to oppose Zeus, is it? So yeah, this is a story of perhaps not opposing, but not siding with them either, and it's very, very beautifully written. Madeline Miller has fantastic prose. The way that she brings forward those themes and really questions you as the reader through her word choice, whilst having such a fluid and smooth read, is pretty outstanding. As number 63, I have Wolf of the Plains by Con Iggulden, the first instalment in the Conqueror series. So this is about Genghis Khan. It's a Bildungsroman about his childhood. He was known as Temujin as a child. So it's a Bildungsroman about Temujin as the sole perspective throughout his very tragic childhood and the first steps he took to craft the greatest empire, well, the biggest empire in history at that point. So yes, it is pretty extraordinary what happens in this book. And if I had not been told it was true and looked it up and knew that this was based on true events, I would not believe it. I think this is far too far-fetched. Got my words mixed up there. Too far-fetched for sure, because it is just crazy how this came to unfold and how a boy who is thrown into a life that it's almost certain him and his family are going to die and he has to look after them, to become the leader of an entire culture basically, and then go on to conquer a huge portion of the world, is just mind-blowing. And he is not the most likeable of figures, but you feel sympathy for what he goes through as a child, and you see how that crafts him into quite the hard and cruel person that he can be because of what he's been through as a child. And yeah, it's quite emotional because you're obviously seeing him as a child and what he goes through. It is quite hard, but it's very engaging and immersive and pretty breathtaking at times as well. Con Iggulden does a great job of character, not just of Temujin, but of his family, his mother, his father, his brothers, and I believe his sister as well. There's a brilliant job of creating that kind of family element, which is huge and acts as really the heart of this story, which, whilst it could have been quite cold and just about the conquering of Genghis Khan crafting his empire, it is about family at the heart of it. And looking into, obviously a lot of this is Con Iggulden's own take on it, but why did he do what he did? So yes, very interesting in that way, and I think that this is a very, very good and efficient story, which I loved and I definitely need to reread soon. And then in number 62, I have Essex Dogs. So this is a work of craft, I'd say, unrivaled in its presentation of medieval warfare in historical fiction. This shows the full scope of a campaign. Not just the battles, not just the planning, but the marches, getting supplies, going through villages, seeing if there's opposition, and that constant tension really of not knowing what's going to happen next. And we follow, from the title, Essex Dogs, a small group of warriors who are just joining the English army in their march through France during the early 100 Years' War. So as I said, this is about the full scope of the campaign. There is no glorification of war in this. It says on the back, some men fight for glory, others fight for coin. The Essex Dogs fight for each other. And that is where the heart of the story stems. Whilst it shows the brutality and utterly strips what is romanticised about medieval warfare by showing that so many people in this war are brutal, nasty, just seeking their own self-preservation, and they're there for money. And they're not there for maybe what we're told to do, what Shakespeare shows us, that it's about patriotism. There is very little of that here. But at the heart of it, they are the Essex Dogs, who they need money to survive, but they're also there to keep each other alive. They care about the others, and that is their main priority. They fight for each other to stay as a group, to look after each other, and they will put themselves in danger with a blink of an eye to help the others. And yeah, that is where I think Dan Jones did a brilliant job of showing the brutality of war without romanticising it, but also showing a group of characters who really care for each other and add that heart, and also an intimate story within this much grander story of the march of the English army. As I said, we follow these characters and we see almost all of them as a perspective at one point or another. Not all of them, but quite a few. And I found that really enjoyable in creating that group sense, how they view each other differently, where you see what's going on, their inner monologues internally, and then what you see other people see about them, and you see that they misinterpret some things, but in other ways are very insightful and can see truths that even the person they're talking about themselves does not see, and it's very interesting that way. It's very character driven, and it's a bit of an examination of the human psyche in that sense as well, because this is a time where PTSD was not recognised, but some of them are most obviously suffering from it, but because others just don't really understand it, it just makes these problems spiral and get worse and worse. And so yes, it does combat the issues of mental health in this as well, and it's very interesting showing that in a medieval setting. And as I said, we see all the grit, trials and tribulations these characters are thrown into and what they go through. And yeah, I thought it was a very great story showing that these are not noble heroes from the Round Table, but they fight for coin and survival. And last up in the 61st spot, I have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. She is one of my favourite authors of all time, and this is book one of the Farseer trilogy and the wider realm of the Elderlings, which encompasses many more books. I believe 5 series, 3 following a certain group of characters, and then 2 slightly different ones but set in the same world. Robin Hobb is one of the greatest writers regarding prose and characters, in my opinion. The way she manipulates language is absolutely beautiful. I saw on Goodreads she read a book about the rules of the English language, and she said, read this so that you know why you're breaking the rules and what effect it has. So she really is a master of studying the English language, and she really knows why she's doing certain things, because this feels like a very different book, written very differently. It may not suit everyone in that sense, but I think if you like this, you will love it. It's one of those. And Fitz Chivalry Farseer is the main character in this series, and he is absolutely fantastic. This is a Bildungsroman. Again, we see him as a child, and he is taken into a completely different lifestyle, but he's looked down upon as he is the illegitimate child of a prince. But he did not know that until he was about, I think he's 5 or 6 at the beginning. And so yeah, he's thrown into this completely different lifestyle, and it's about him growing up, and he's taken advantage of by those around him, because of course, even though he is an illegitimate child, he is still an influential figure, as he is one of the nobility now. And yeah, we see really that really people take advantage of him and really exploit his circumstance, and it's very tragic in that sense, but it's a beautiful story as well, and the rest of the series is brilliant. This will most certainly not be the last book by Robin Hobb you see on my list of favourites, but yes, this is the first that I'm showing, and this is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. So there you go, that is my 70th favourite book all the way to my 61st favourite book. So yeah, it feels like we're still quite away from number 1, but I will be doing a series of videos slowly getting closer and closer. But yes, hopefully you enjoyed me talking about these. Please do let me know in the comments below about these books. Have you read them? Did I intrigue you? What were your thoughts? Are there any that sprung to mind that sound a bit similar to these that you would recommend to me? I'd really be thankful for more recommendations that are in a similar vein to these books, because as I said, these are my favourite books, so I'd love to read more similar to them. But everyone, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I love talking about books, and I hope to be talking to you more about them in the future and in the comments below. Thank you for watching.